I usually talk about bikes, but I actually have plenty of experience with cars as well. And once I return to the US, I might end up with a new one yet again. So I wanted to do maybe 2 or 3 videos on the various cars that I've researched and like, just so that you would have this information. Maybe you are looking for a car as well. I'm typically interested in used cars, not new ones. New cars come with a variety of risks, and I have purchased both used and new, but the used ones are the ones I would prefer to go with. So in this video, I'm going to be focusing just on the small cars. Now, these cars are cars I like personally based on my research, and I'm going to tell you what I like or dislike about them. But these are not necessarily the only choices. There are many experts who will recommend other cars as well. I don't think any of the cars I recommend would be condemned by any of them though. So the first one is going to be the smart car. The smart car is the tiniest one on this list. It is actually not a very light car. The fuel consumption as a result is not as advanced as most people expected when they came on the market. There's a long story with this car as to how it came into the US. This was never intended to be an American car, but an entrepreneur on the West Coast started buying them retail and fixing them up, tuning them so that they would be legal on the US market. And he would push them on the market for $30,000. This was more than a decade ago. And Daimler took notice, and that's how they started to push it into the US. But as you know, eventually the car was routed and Daimler had to cancel it because of certain stupid mistakes they have made. The car could be sold and it could still be on this market, but it isn't because of what they have done. Now the thing is, you can buy this car for dirt cheap. Check this out. This car still has a little bit of a mileage in it for the price of a halfway decent folding bike. And I'm serious, there are so many of these cars around. You can also import in the European one, but then only for the body, because I would have the engine and everything ripped out and just replace it in the US. I really do like the first version of it. Not even this one, because I prefer the 2 separate lights that make it look like a Mercedes. So this one is something like the version 1.2. But the price is something worth looking at because, once again, you're under $2,000. There are some really cheap deals on these cars, and the main virtue of it is the so-called tritium cell. The cell is made of really high-strength steel, and this is something you get with all of the Mercedes cars. They are very sturdy. If somebody hits you, they are going to feel it, notwithstanding the tiny size of the car. Of course, at this price point, you will have some body work, but not a lot. And these blemishes are a good point for haggling the price down. I would probably haggle the price down even lower than this. I'll probably get it for $1,800. And that's basically getting a car for free. What I would want to do with this, obviously, you can just fix the body and continue driving it like it is. I have driven this car. The transmission is garbage. The power is practically non-existent. I'm not even sure how many horsepower the original model had. Did they have 70 or 80 or some kind of a ridiculously low level of horsepower? I'm not sure. With each version, they increased the power a little bit, but they never got to the point where it would have been functional on an American road. And that is one of the several reasons why this model ultimately failed on the US market. What I would do would be definitely to seriously upgrade it. This is a $4,000 typical package. I'm just showing you one of the possibilities. There are so many packages. You have really lots of choices, and make sure that you get the package that fits your car. They claim an increase of 90%. If you have an 80 horsepower smart car, this could push it to 140, maybe even 150 horsepower, which is not exactly a rocket, but it's certainly better than nothing. What I don't like about this is that this converts the engine into the turbo, which is not going to last as long. You end up keeping your old motor, the old engine that's in the car already, and you have to keep the old crappy transmission system, which nobody likes. A better solution is to spend a little bit more money, really not a lot more. This is a $5,000 kit based on the Suzuki Hayabusa engine, which is a massive 200 horsepower without any turbo. So this is the engine we are talking about, the 2014. Some of these engines fit the Smart car, and some companies have made kits for the Smart. There are a number of companies, just like with Brompton, that sell you a whole bunch of stuff, everything from performance upgrades to body kits to wheels and tires. You really have lots of choices for this car, and there are clubs and organizations that will support you. So owning one of these is very much like owning a classic Brompton or something that you can really keep for life and tune the hell out of it, to be honest. And 200 horsepower for such a tiny car is really something. If Daimler made such a configuration available, they might still be in business. And here are some tuning jobs that people have done. This is obviously not necessarily my taste or yours, but it just goes to show what you can do. If I went with this engine for 5,000, I would probably need a new transmission. I would gut the interior to some degree. That means I would probably rip out the seats, put in modern sports seats, definitely new wheels, a new suspension package, and new tires. You're going to end up at maybe $15,000, $18,000. It's going over $10,000, but it is still a lot cheaper than even a new Corolla. New Corollas nowadays start at $25,000. Same thing with the Honda Civic. And this way you would have something unique, something nobody else has. And something that, because of the power to weight ratio, is going to be as much of a pocket rocket as a mid-sized BMW or even some lower end sports cars. So I think it's worth looking into it if somebody is interested in very small and very cool at the same time. The other car I include in this list is the Fiat Abarth, which was a really cute car. I have driven this car as well, and look, for about 10K you get a really low mileage model. 51,000 miles is really nothing. This car has another 100,000 miles in it, which means another 8 years with frequent driving. And if you drive a lot, you might keep it for another decade or even longer. This is a really hot, really cool car. Driving it feels a bit like sitting on a toilet inside a phone booth. It is narrow and tall, but the way the suspension is done and the crazy sound of the exhaust. This thing has no muffler on it or not much of any isolation, and it barely passes the legal limits in the US, but it does, and so you don't need to tune it as well. Unlike with this Smart car, for $10,000 you get something that's ready to hit the road right on. And if you look at the condition of what you get for $10,000, it's really not bad. This is really very good condition for a used car. I'm sure you would have dimes and nickels repairs and maintenance, and that's unavoidable with a used car, but I don't think anything major up to 150,000 miles. Many people have driven these cars up to that point. Unfortunately, an extreme lifespan like 250,000 miles or 500,000 miles is unlikely to happen here because this is a turbo. But you could refresh the engine, and it's a very sexy interior. I'm not too crazy about leather, but if I had no other choice, I certainly like the colors and the shapes and the design. And the driving experience is an absolute riot, even though there are cheap plastics everywhere. Cheap but cute plastics. So this is $10,000, and there are definitely options for even lower price if you accept a little bit of body work or you accept a higher mileage car. The third car on the list is the only electric car I have included. If I was to buy one, I will be buying this one. This one is also a Fiat 500, but this is not the Abarth, it is the electric. As you can see, you can get this for less than $10,000, and the mileage is only 25K. I think the battery is warranted up to 100K. I assume the reason people are not buying this is primarily because they are scared of the range, they are tired of recharging it. Consider this car is from a southern location, so the condition must be really good, rust-free. There is no snow in New Mexico, no ice, no salt on the roads, so that is all good news. That means you can get a really cool electric car for not a lot of money, and this thing still has a good 5-6 years of life in it with hardly any maintenance because it is electric. And I downloaded the map just to make sure people understand that you don't have to have a Tesla to charge. You can use the Charge Point or the Blink, any of the popular systems that are really all over the place. Now, I'm selfishly showing New York City, but I could show you any part of the US. There are plenty of chargers. It is true that most people would not want to sit around for even 20 minutes to get a charge. And it's true that this car is only going to last for about 100 miles on a charge. In the winter, it might drop down to 70. So this is definitely not a long-range car. But how many people really need a long-range car to begin with? I'm not crazy about the wheels and this big gap. I'm not sure why it is suspended like this. I would probably just swap out the wheel and the tire as well and get something a little bigger. Also pushed out to the side to get a more sporty stance on it. And then if the battery is kaput after 100,000 miles, there can be some interesting things that you could do. Either you buy a new battery for about 10,000 or more, or maybe you could build something, like to build a series hybrid with a generator feeding into a smaller and less expensive battery package. That is something I would be interested in doing. But for now, this car still has plenty of mileage in it, so I don't think it's being sold because of the battery. The battery definitely has to be tested before I buy an electric car from anybody. And also the ability to replace it. I don't think I would want to go back to Fiat to get a new one. I think I would want to build my own package. On the other hand, if I do need that, if I have no other choice, I do want some support from the company that made the car. Just a side note here, the Nissan Leaf is not generally supported by Nissan. Some versions of it, some vintages are simply not supported at all. Don't take it for granted that the company is going to have a new battery package for the model you have, unless you have communicated with them before purchasing the car. It is a very lightweight car, even with the battery in it. It is 1.25 tons, which is not bad for a car at least. And this is going to be the last car on this list, the last small car I am considering. This is a Honda Civic, very rugged, very reliable. This came out in 2006, a year after I bought my Suzuki, and I regretted not waiting another year. This is actually a hybrid. And it is so cheap. It's very cheap. It has a lot of mileage on it, and hybrid batteries typically cost as much as $3,000. So I am assuming that the owner might be selling it, well, partly because he has driven the crap out of it, but partly also because it might need a new battery pack, which is not going to be expensive as the replacement of a battery for a fully electric car, but it is going to cost you a few $1,000s. I love the lines of this car. The classic method to get a great design, which is to repeat patterns. Look at this arch. It repeats the same pattern that you see here, and even the pattern that you see, the profile of the car. I thought that this was one of the best Civic Honda has ever designed, and it's incredibly reliable, lasts forever. And even if you need to refresh it or replace something, there's a little bit of bodywork here. It is not a lot of money. This car can be maintained for the rest of your life unless you get into an accident. The car is lightweight and a bit fragile, so it doesn't really hold up very well in accidents. That's the one downside. This is the best design, but for a two-door version, they also have a coupe, also pretty reasonable price, $6,000, some bodywork, but this is the fully gasoline version. And this is a coupe. It has a more sporty appearance inside. It doesn't have as smooth an appearance on the outside as the four-door. I typically like the two doors better, and I like a sporty car better, but in this case I might take an exception and go for the four-door car because they changed the design of the lights front and rear, and it just doesn't look as cool as the one with the four-door. But this is a great coupe. It's a much cheaper coupe than the Fiat. I might add that there is a ton of third-party support for every single car on this list. And that's, of course, the fun part for anybody who has built his own electric bicycle. As you can see on my book, I have built my own bike and I never look back. I would never want to buy a prefab bike. And if I bought one of these old cars, I would probably tune them pretty severely. Not even for the performance, but mostly for the suspension, the looks, the brakes, the interior, things like that. So these are my small car recommendations, not only to you, but to myself as well, as I'm looking at the possibility of getting a car again once back to the US and living in the suburbs.
I'll be back.